Minnesota, according to sections 4.8 and 10.1.8 of Stearns County Land Use and Zoning Ordinance. Elevate a new home with an alternative elevation method in the residential 1 or R1 zoning district. Proposed project is located in part of Government Lot 2 lying south of Eden Lake and north of Eden Lake Road in section 26 of Eden Lake Township. Property address is 20456 Eden Lake Road. And report, please.
Do we want to go through who visited the site, please?
Jason?
Yes.
Yes. Jason, and yes for me, and Jake? Yes. Yes. And Rich? Yes, I did. Sarah? No. No. Okay.
Okay. Very good. So the background on this site is that there was a permit issued for this new home back in June, and upon starting construction, then the builder realized they weren't going to have room to, well, he can give the whole story, but when you elevate a structure in floodplain, you have to go 15 feet out from the structure with your fill, and then you can taper down. The property is such that they don't have 15 feet, and they were going to use some of the neighbor's property for that requirement. And then the neighbor changed their mind, and so they switched gears, and instead of doing the fill for 15 feet, now they're just using an alternative elevation method. So that's the plans that was in your packet to elevate other than using fill. And so by ordinance, that requires the conditional use permit if they're not going to do it on fill. So that's why we're here. This is on Eden Lake, which is north of Eden Valley. And let's see. Okay. We did submit the plans to the DNR for review. We did not receive comments back. They do have a new septic system permit, so they'll be putting in a new septic system. The property will be underneath the maximum 25% lot coverage. Setbacks are met. So if the conditional use permit is approved, the recommended conditions would be our standard conditions for these type of permits. Number 1 would be requiring that the as-built construction is certified by an engineer or architect as being in compliance with the general design standards of the state building code. Specifically that all electrical, heating, ventilation, plumbing, and air conditioning equipment must be at or above the regulatory flood protection elevation or designed to prevent flood water from entering or accumulating within them during times of flooding. And then number 2, they would need to use construction site best management practices when they're doing construction out there. And then 3rd, provide an elevation certification when they're done so that we ensure the lowest floor of that home meets the regulatory flood protection elevation. That's all I have. I do have one letter from the public when we get to the public hearing.
Alrighty, and leadership for this application? Yes. Please come forward and have a seat here.
Paul Munsell, I represent Excelsior Homes and the consumer of South Cargill. And as she explained, so we were permitted on this. There was a little snafu that I wasn't aware of having to be out 15 feet. I did get permission from the neighbor to build a retaining wall, which you saw on the west side. And then we got the foundation in. A couple days later, she changed her mind, or they changed their mind. I was in a little bit of a pickle there. Applied for the conditional use permit. So I'd have to move the wall back 10 feet. We meet all the setbacks. So pretty much in a nutshell, I'm asking for your permission for a variance, conditional use permit.
Any questions?
One question. Are the pilings poured already?
They are.
Okay, I
Yes.
thought I saw those.
Yeah.
Questions, anyone? Yeah, pretty much,
Yep, so this letter is from David and Roseanne Kyle. I think that's how you say their name. They're the landowners to the west. We approve of the variance or conditional use permit if none of our property is affected by it. If there is a retaining wall built, it must be on their property and maintained by the owner of the property. Submitted by David and Roseanne Kyle.
I will close the public hearing then. Questions, anybody has any questions or anything?
I have a question in regards to the retaining wall. Was that designed by an engineer?
No, it's not tall enough to need to be designed by an engineer, so it only stands about 3 feet tall.
Are you looking for a? Oh, actually, I'm sorry, we're going to.
Going to be
Sorry,
a
no,
fast
right
hearing.
Is the proposal consistent with existing county ordinance? I'll just speak up and say I believe it is. Does the proposal conform to the comprehensive plan of the county? Please list applicable sections.
Mr. Chair, Jason Wienerman, I believe it does under Lakeshore Living Goals. I'm going to number 6 and number 7, but with a little bit of modification. So number 6 is expand mitigation requirements, requesting to vary from lake setbacks to preserve the environment. In this case, it's not quite the setbacks, but it's the elevation standards we're sort of modifying in this one, which is an innovative design. And the second one is to create riparian standards that balance both the interests of year-round and seasonal residents. Again, not quite riparian, but we are in the floodplain, so we are protecting the resources by an alternative method.
Thank you, Jason. Is the proposal compatible with the existing neighborhood? Why or why not?
Mr. Chair, I believe it is. There's other residential houses and cabins in the vicinity. Water.
Thank you. How has the applicant demonstrated that standards and criteria stated, excuse me, will be satisfied?
Chair, go ahead, Jason.
Oh, you got it.
There's some conditions, recommended conditions that are listed, and they've supplied plans that show fall, or they're planning to fall within the ordinance.
Thank you. That I will try to move.
Chair, I will make a motion to recommend approval with the 3 recommended conditions.
Thank you. I have a motion. Looking for a second.
Mr. Chair, I'll second that.
There's a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bo.
To just approve the minutes.
I'll abstain from that one.
Was number 2 the cannabis review, or are we?
I don't know. It went. I got it here, and it's different in different places.
Number
Okay.
2 is, oh, sorry.
Well,
We can do it either way.
I'll approve the minutes as presented.
I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you. And now, cannabis.
Yes, Angie runs Animal Services last month. You all had, some questions. I did submit them. to all of those questions, most of which are not related to zoning. Most of which are questions that the county is considering. Well, as it relates to, as far as strictly zoning, that isn't giving answers because they don't know yet. Office of Cannabis Management. And then, the legislature changes law. The answer is we don't know all the answers to your questions. Is that we would like thoughts or concerns, questions related to that. It's going to be third, and then
Test, test, test. Okay. So the purpose of tonight would be, I can certainly go through and review everything again, but I'm hearing or seeing shakes. So I think if you were to ask me what's the most important thing as a planning commission do you need to look at, right? It's going to be, where do you want these various license types, all the way from cultivation, micro, meso, manufacturer, retailing, wholesale, transport, testing, event center, delivery. Do you believe that the proposal aligns with what you would have in mind, what you would like to recommend to the commissioners?
So if we're live, from my review of what you presented, and as you've indicated, this is an incredibly new endeavor. And the state has given us a floor we can't go under. So we are bound by, we can be less lenient in the state, but we can't be more lenient in the state. So I think county staff and the attorney have given us yo person's work on this and done a nice effort of giving a foundation. And as you stated, rules take years to adequately develop, and we learn along the way. So I know that Stearns County is often in the vanguard of things, but this might be one where we just are comfortable in the pack.
I agree.
Right with you.
I'm in agreement too. I don't know why we need to go forward with anything different right now.
Yeah, and one of the questions I was going to ask is, I mean, is it something that we can be proactive enough to put on the agenda, let's say a year from now or a year and a half from now, to now review, okay? We've had a year and a half worth of things popping up. And at least then there's some kind of formal call to action, not that we approve something now to wait and see, and then 10 years later from now, we're waiting and seeing there's all kinds of challenges that are popping up. And you guys normally do a good job of bringing those things up when we start to encounter them, but that might be a proactive way of. I agree.
no, I agree that, yeah, if after the first year, we take a look at the numbers.
We may
across
have
the board,
nobody.
numbers of incidents and go from there.
Can townships do their own zoning experiments?
Yes, they can, and that's actually one of the next things I need to do is look through each of our township ordinances. We have 17 of the 30-some that have their own, and identify if they do nothing, is it going to be their responsibility, or if they do nothing, is it going to be ours? Some of them are written differently, but the answer is yes. The townships and cities obviously can be different for both zones.
They would still be subject to the state standards as
Yes,
well.
that's correct.
Uh-huh.
Right. So there's the zoning bucket, and then there's the registration bucket. And the registration bucket isn't something we have to worry about here. The board will worry about that. But townships can also do their own registration. And one thing you may have found interesting, because I just got this information today, is so there was an early application process that you probably read about in the newspapers that these businesses could apply for. So in Stearns County, and I don't know if they're listed by postal code or if they're by physical address, if that makes sense. So here's what I found. There's one applied for currently. So again, this is their early application. One in Sauk Center City. Again, I don't know if it's Sauk Center Township or Sauk Center City. I'm guessing city. Micro business, one in Richmond, micro business, 2 in Cold Spring, 1 manufacturing, 1 micro, 1 in St. Joseph, micro, 3 in Sartell, mezzos, and then 17 in St. Cloud, mezzo, micro, retail, transport, and wholesale.
You know, how many of those would be like existing businesses that are already adjacent to that?
I don't, because all the state gives us per county is what I basically just said. It's not even a physical
Right, you can't
address.
even look them up and say like, oh, they're like one step removed from doing it already.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I don't even know who they are. I don't even have a name associated with it. That's not public.
Because if they're like CBD shops that are already out there, it's like that makes perfect sense
Right.
to me.
And they're projecting by 2030 it's going to be a $1.5 billion market. So I do think an annual review of zoning is appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
And so the townships will be okay though, if for some reason, and this is the inverse, right? I keep getting it messed up. Normally we can be more restrictive, not less restrictive. But in this case, it's the opposite, right? We can be less restrictive than the state.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about strictly zoning, you can be more restrictive than the state, and townships can only be more restrictive than the state. Now, if, for example, we had a township that came to the county and said, we want to handle our own registrations, and we don't want to limit the number, we want to allow 1,000 of them, they can be less restrictive than the Stearns County because the law allows them to have their own ordinance.
Yeah.
And the law also allows them to have their own zoning ordinance, but the laws are written differently because the zoning ordinance law says you can have your own regulation, but they cannot be less restrictive than. That's not written the same for cannabis registration.
You can't say no. More.
Right,
Yes.
yes,
Right.
that's why it's the inverse.
Correct.
So if I heard you right, I will make a motion that we recommend the county board consider the proposal you've presented us for consideration for adoption and presentation at the upcoming public hearing.
Yes.
Along with the request to review this on an annual basis for the next 2.
Got it.
Okay. I
Perfect.
have a motion Looking for, I have a motion and a second, the Jasons. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Anything more?
Well, actually, so there was just a real brief thing that we may want to consider for a future meeting, and Angie and I spoke about this at the Board of Adjustment meeting. Under our comprehensive plan, living goals, we have this beautiful little phrase called support housing options that give people in all stages of life and all economic means viable choices for safe, stable, and affordable homes. That is the default standard everybody goes to when we're talking about some variance or conditional use permit regarding updating of a house. And I'm wondering, because we use that one so frequently, does it actually mean anything? Or is it just sort of the, we're going to wave this flag and let you in? So something for the group to think about, what should we do with that particular line item?
I've looked at that one a few times when we're considering applications that seem to fire up some of the county commissioners that attend our meetings when we're talking about things like accessory buildings, because it fits well under that one if you wanted to do it. But I can see in the other way too, where like it also encapsulates everything that ever gets presented to us. So like I've looked at it both ways and been like, well, you can use it in for or against anything you ever want to say. So
I mean, it's a tool that provides us no guidance and lets us do what we want.
yeah, exactly. Drought.
So just, I was noticing when, it was funny, we had 3 of these, and I was like, looking over at the person who's making the motion going, so you're gonna hit number 3 again?
It's funny you say that. You're right. That's exactly how it gets used. It's just the catch-all.
Yeah.
And you could part and parcel it to actually get more specific and give it meaning. Because back to the point, you can argue for and against it on every single.
And well, that's,
Way
but
it's
most of
worded.
these are that. They can be used to argue for or against.
Right.
Well, true statement, but in this case, you could, on the same one, just about every single time, you could argue for or against it because it's so vague. And your point, you could do that with a few others, but there are some that are specific enough that it applies to maintaining vegetation on something. Well, that doesn't apply every time. I mean, case, you could easily argue for or against it in just one of them per time, versus like to Jason's point, given one, you could argue both sides of the fence because it's so vague.
Which number?
Number 3.
I almost have it memorized.
I think what we can do too is just, like you said, Member Wienerman, just kind of think about it, think on it, and then maybe at the end of the year, I can look at how the Board of Adjustment used it and kind of what context, and then you all can have a talk about it and say, oh, that's maybe a stretch, or no, that actually made sense, and then you can at least see, I mean, Jacob served on the Board of Adjustment for a whole 9 years, and so, you know, then you can kind of see how it's being used, and maybe you think it's okay, and maybe you think it's not, and we need to add to it or eliminate
Edit it somehow?
Or what?
Edit it
Or edit it,
somehow?
yeah.
Mhm.
So thanks for bringing that up.
I think it's really good.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yep. There's something to noodle on for the next
Yeah.
couple months.
Anything more from anyone? All right then, we are adjourned.
I like it.
Here, one more bang.
6:30, look at you guys.